Hey everybody, happy Monday. Hope you're all doing well and had a great start to your week. This is Shannon Graham Cornell from Better Home Organizing, and I'm coming to you today on day 17 of my March Facebook Live event to talk about all the paper. So paper, not gonna lie, paper is, I think, one of the least fun things to organize. And part of the reason I think that that's true, at least for me, is it can be a lot of work. And it's not like organizing a closet or your garage where when you're done, it looks really cool and you can tell a big difference. Paper just doesn't doesn't have that same visual wow factor as your pantry or a linen closet or whatever. So it's just kind of a lot of work and not a lot of visual payoff. But when it comes to being able to find stuff, it's definitely worth it. So it's not the most fun, I don't think, category, but it's still a really important category. So we're going to talk today about some things to consider when you're thinking about organizing your paper. And we're going to talk about the one very most important thing that you should think about when you're getting your paper organized. But before we get there, I want to share this thought. So very often when we're talking about organizing and in the organizing world, one of the best practices or rules of thumb is if we don't have it, we don't have to organize it. So that's one of the reasons why we start always with the decluttering process. If we start with the decluttering process, then it can be likely that when we get to the part where we organize, it's not nearly as much work because there isn't as much stuff to have to try to corral in some kind of system. And so I think that that is actually more true with paper than anywhere else. It is this idea that if you don't keep it, you don't have to organize it. You don't have to file it. You don't have to categorize it. You don't have to mess with it. You don't have to dig through it when you're trying to find the piece of paper that you really do need. So I think, keep it in mind that I think the idea that if the less is more, keep the stuff that's really important and get rid of the rest of it. There are things that we need to keep. And before you get rid of anything that is legal related, tax related, vital records related, you'll definitely want to talk to the appropriate professional, CPA, estate planning lawyer, whoever the appropriate category might be, before you decide to get rid of something. Or if you don't have those people, then, hey, Kristen, then, you can, if you Google how long to keep important documents, you will find checklist after checklist that tells you the things you should keep and for how long. And most of them have a lot of overlap, but some of them have, extra categories of papers they might talk about that might be of interest to you. So, find one of those that makes sense to you and seems like something you can live with, and follow that for that guidance. So there are some things that we really don't want to get rid of and we should keep for a certain amount of time. So one example is always, you never throw away a birth certificate. Vital records like that, you don't want to get rid of that. But a lot of the paper that we keep, we don't need to keep. One of my favorite examples is owner's manuals. I work with clients very often, and one of the things that we are dealing with are owner's manuals, and they've got an owner's manual for everything. The thing is, owner's manuals are bulky, and we hardly ever reference them. And if we do, pretty much all the products these days have their owner's manuals online. So as long as you know more or less what your make and model is for whatever it is you're Googling, Google the owner's manual for that thing, and 9 times out of 10, you'll find it, assuming we're even needing to look at the manuals. But we always feel like we have to keep them just in case. And that's an example where you really don't. You may decide that for some of your products that you have, you might, let's say the cleaning mechanism is more complicated. Tear out the pages of the owner's manual that make sense to you, that you might think you need to access. Tear off the cover where it has who the make, the manufacturer is and what the model number is. Tear out the cleaning section and then throw the rest of it away. They're super bulky. Staple it together, hang on to that if you have to keep something. But for the most part, a lot of that stuff we don't have to keep. So I would recommend talking to the appropriate professional, doing a little bit of Googling on the types of things, types of papers that you should keep and for how long, and use that as your starting point. And then be ruthless about the rest of the paper. If there are things that you're keeping because they are memorabilia, treat them as memorabilia. Don't keep them in your active file folders or your active file situation. If there's that special paper from college that you just can't bear to get rid of, that you don't have electronically, that you really want a hard copy of, keep it in your memorabilia section of your storage, not in your active file section. So that definitely is something I recommend to start with. Be ruthless. Okay, so we're ruthless. We've gotten rid of all the owner's manuals that we don't need, whatever. We know what it is we want to keep. So what do we do with the stuff that we want to keep? So here is the most important thing for you to think through when you're thinking about organizing your files and organizing your paper. And the most important thing is, what system are you most likely to maintain? There is nothing worse than getting behind on your paper system. And so if you've taken the time to get organized with your paper, don't get clever. Unless you really like clever. So think about what is a system that you are likely to keep up with. And that is the most important thing. After that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you do it, keep your papers in baskets. It doesn't matter if you keep them in binders. It doesn't matter if you keep them in a file cabinet. None of that matters as long as it's something that you can deal with maintaining. That's the most important, the most important thing. The rest of it doesn't really matter as long as it's something that you can keep up on. But so here's some things. So in addition to that, certainly there are some things that we do want to think about when we are coming up with that system that we're going to maintain. So think about your storage mechanism. Some people are really into binders. Some people are really into stacking things. Some people are really into vertical files. Think about what storage mechanism is going to be the simplest for you. Again, we want this to be so easy to maintain that it's foolproof for you. So what is it that speaks to you about how to store your papers? Don't feel like you have to do a file cabinet. You can do, the magazine racks. They're kind of not magazine racks. They're magazine, vertical storage containers. You might put file folders in those rather than, dealing with the pockets and the tabs and all of that stuff. I know that, for me, I love the idea of having categories and then subfolders within that. But I also know I don't maintain that at all. And Terry, does wadding them up count? If you can find them again, then yes, it counts. That's perfectly fine too. But probably not as easy to access. But if it works for you, totally do it. So think about so if you are not, into file cabinets, don't feel like that's how you have to store them. Be creative. and leverage what's going to work for you. Also, don't feel as though your paper needs to be stored in an office or in a basement. Where does your paper generally land? If it generally lands in your, on your dining room table, then maybe what is better for you than trying to retrain yourself to drag this stuff to the basement. Instead, set up your file storage or your paper storage where you're likely to be dealing with it. So maybe you get some kind of cabinet with a cute little basket that can hold some of your papers, and put that in your dining room, and just go with what is going to actually be easy for you, rather than trying to retrain yourself, because you won't. Retraining yourself to deal with paper is no fun. So it's not, it's not worth trying. Go where your inclinations are leading you. Also think about your categories. Large categories are fine. If you are, so we have in our file system, we have a folder that says cars, and within each, within that category, we have a folder for each of our cars. There's only 2 cars, so it's not like there's a lot of folders, but there's a folder. If we had more cars than that, I probably would get rid of those subcategories, because honestly, stick the document in the folder that says cars, and that's close enough. So think about how granular you are wanting to get with your categories. And again, keep it as simple as possible, where you'll also be able to find them again. So, if you've got birth certificates, you can have a folder that just says birth certificates, and all of the family's birth certificates can live in there. You don't need a separate file folder for each birth certificate, unless that really brings you joy. If categorizing and subcategorizing makes you really happy, then go for it. If you've got a really cute, label situation, label maker, and you've got a cute font you're using and you love making those labels, then go for it. But for the most part, again, you're going to want to be as simple as possible. Also, keep in mind that you may want to consider, you don't have to, but you may want to consider different places where different file types might live. So in this case, I'm thinking about a place where you keep the paper that is temporary in your life, that's kind of in process. Forms you need to sign, or a receipt you need to hang on to for a couple of days till you decide if, that doodad you just bought is, worth keeping. Things that are kind of in process and temporary, you may have one place to store that. You're certainly not going to want to go and file all of those things. So have an in process basket. I actually have an inbox. I have an inbox for my work, and I have an inbox for personal. So the things that are temporary that I'm not going to file, or, but I need to hang on to for a minute, I keep there. And then also consider things that you are going to want to file and you're going to want to keep for a certain period of time, but that you're likely that you're going to want to access again. So some kind of active storage area for your files. Again, it's a little with a little more structure to it than just a basket for like in process things. Maybe a little bit of categorization, but things that you think that you are going to need to get to, and you don't necessarily need it readily available on your desk, but you may, it may be in a cabinet somewhere, or it may be, that's maybe what you might use a file cabinet for that kind of thing. And then think about deep storage. So like the stuff that we need to hang on for 7 years. The only reason you're going to need to access it is because the IRS is calling. Otherwise, you're never going to get to it, but you can't get rid of it, or you don't want to get rid of it. So consider deep storage for that. That may be a box in the garage or a box in your attic that you only have for those purposes. The stuff that, when you Google that list of things you should keep, the stuff that it says you should keep forever, you may want to put that in deep storage. So, think about, do I have an in-process, kind of an active and a deep storage for my papers? And then think about your retention policy. One tip that I read a long time ago that I love is, particularly for the things that you are supposed to keep for 2 years or for 1 year or 4 years or whatever it might be, on the folder or on the folder, like the tab for the folder, write when it is that needs to be recycled or shredded. And then that way, if you flip through your file cabinet, if you're using file cabinet, you can see, I was supposed to get rid of that April 2018. I can go ahead and toss that out. So you can think about that and give yourself little reminders for how to clean that out. But I love the idea of putting a date on a tab or on a piece of paper itself for how long I need to keep it and then how I can get rid of it. So those are some ideas for coming up with a system that you can maintain. But it's going to depend on what your tolerance is and what you're willing to do. I know one person who, when she was talking about this topic, she had said that she actually has a basket that she keeps and she puts all of her papers in, and she files 1 time a year, and it works brilliantly for her. Anything she thinks she's going to want to keep, she puts in this basket, and then 1 time a year she sits down, maybe outside on her deck or whatever with a glass of wine, and goes through and deals with all of the papers all at once rather than a little bit at a time. So think too about what works for you in terms of keeping up with this, also in terms of timing. So and it doesn't have to be you file every day, although you might want to. I don't. I don't do it once a year, but I definitely don't do it every day. I clean out my inbox a lot. That in-process area I was telling you about, I clean that out a lot. That I'm more often decluttering than anything else. But again, think about what's going to work for you. But definitely don't feel like you have to do file cabinets only. I think that's, if you're going to do this, make it fun for yourself. Unless file cabinets are the way to go. And if you remember when we looked at the Container Store stuff, they had some pretty file cabinets and things in neat colors, and make the file cabinets much more fun than just your typical gray or black. All right, that is it for this evening. So thank you so much for joining. And oh, Terry, I just saw your comment. You have to save these for retirement. So absolutely. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and I will be back tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.